This episode is brought to you by Ardan Labs Education. Sign up today to learn advanced concepts in Go, Docker, Kubernetes, Terraform, and more. Visit ardanlabs.com/education for more information.
Welcome to the Ardan Labs podcast. Our special guest today is Blain Smith. Hey, Blaine, thanks for hanging out with us today.
Yeah, anytime, man. It's good to see you again.
So, Blaine, I know you're coming to us from upstate New York, where at least right now you're getting buried in snow. Better you than me. That's why I left New York. I want nothing to do with. If I never see snow again in my lifetime, life will be good. That was kind of my goal traveling over the last few years.
Just finding a warm place to live.
Yeah. Like right now, it's like 60 in Miami, and I'm already looking at like South American countries to move. Now, that being said, I just got married, and my wife is Colombian, and she's never seen snow. So I know I have at least one more snow in me because she has to experience it. But all right, so enough about that. This podcast is all about you. And so give everybody who's listening the 2-minute sort of drill on what you're doing today. So what is Blaine doing today?
Mostly I'm in the world of Go all day, every day at Subspace, and I'm doing telemetry work on the POPs and routers that is part of the Subspace network. So we're using Go on the control plane to sort of dig into the network cards that are on the servers, pinging other servers across the internet, and collecting all those ping stats.
Oh, wait, back up. What does Subspace do? Because if anybody's watching the YouTube, the T-shirt is really cool, actually. I love it. But tell me what the product is, because I'm not sure what it is.
The product is basically network as a service. So you have things like functions as a service from AWS. You have infrastructure as a service from all the cloud providers. So we're geared towards network as a service. So you can sign up for Subspace, put in your credit card. You can then have a server that you own and spin up either packet accelerator or a tunnel, and you'll be given a Subspace IP address, and then you can use that IP address instead of your dedicated IP and push traffic over the Subspace network for better reliability, for better speeds, under any circumstances that you want. So it's basically just network as a service that you can provision as an engineer.
Okay, so I'm going to tell me that I'm wrong. I feel like you're acting like a proxy server for my browser at the end of the day. Like why is this better than me just going through my ISP?
Normal internet, because the normal internet does not account for more real-time applications. So that's what we're sort of trying to fix, is the real-time WebRTC, peer-to-peer, like that sort of like high traffic video traffic that we're trying to solve. And on each of all of our POPs, we have real-time analysis on what the next best path should be taken for your specific packet. And those POPs will react to any sort of network downtime or loss or latency or jitter.
Are you your own AS? Are you your own autonomous system?
We are, actually. It's good you brought that up. We're a pretty high ranked AS in the internet exchanges, so we're just behind Facebook and Amazon.
Wow.
We're above Netflix at this point. So we're trying to shoot for Cloudflare. We're on our way up, but we're not that high yet. We have about 190 POPs, somewhere around there, 120, 190. We're in the hundreds. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay, no, that's serious stuff. So we're going to get back to you, but I got to ask this last question. So what was everybody thinking about when Facebook shut down their AS network to the world?
don't put all of your credentials and badges behind the same domain, I guess.
Everybody started wondering where the keys were, right? Over there, like, okay, do we have keys?
That was a fun time.
Wow, man. So you're learning it has to be some lower level networking and stuff, and you're leveraging a lot of Go for that then.
Yeah, we're actually, because it just seems like a really good fit for the Go side, but we're also marrying that to eBPF and tapping right into the kernel itself. So we're using both of those to not only do telemetry, but sort of do like control plane like management.
Wow. Okay, we're going to get back to this. This is fascinating. I had, for some reason, there's so much kind of gaming companies where you live. I had this sense that you were going to be doing something on the gaming side of things. So how long have you been at Subspace?
Since the beginning of December, actually. This is fresh. So
Nice.
I'm just taking into it now, but I love the space. I dipped my toe into this go to space when I was at my previous job, because it was in gaming. There's a lot of like real-time gaming traffic, and I just sort of loved it. And once the opportunity presented itself, I went all in.
No, it's brilliant. I think this is good stuff to learn. The networking side is, I wanted to take a computer networking class. I know enough to get in trouble, and I know enough to code at the socket level, but I don't know much more after that, right? And I just hate things being a black hole. So now I got a good resource here to go below level L4, right?
Oh, we're that low.
Okay. All right. So okay. So we got that. We're going to get back to that before we are done. But I'm going to ask you my favorite question that I ask every single guest. I want you to jump back in the time machine and think about that first kind of experience, the first experience that pops into your head of you working on a computer and having that moment of joy, or that moment of like I can control this thing, or that moment that you have as a programmer even today. What was that first moment? Do you remember that?
Actually, I do. So it was back when my parents bought me the single unit AST machines. I don't even think it had a DVD drive at that point. It may have, but that was when, like, it was Encarta 95 or 96, somewhere around that point. I remember having the Encarta CD. And for those of you who don't know that, that's basically how it was Encyclopedia Britannica on a disc before Wikipedia was a thing. And I remember trying to teach myself dialing into AOL to get information on how to do HTML and write HTML. And one of the first websites I was teaching myself to build was a Metallica dedication site of all of their CDs, that I had to sort of lay out all the graphics and download all this stuff and put them in tables and space them. And it was just a really awesome experience to write a bunch of lines of HTML in a text file and then switch over to a browser and hit a button and see like completely different representation of what I typed. And the feedback was just immediate.
When did you graduate high school? And do you remember kind of how old you were when you did your Metallica website?
Yeah, I graduated high school in 2000, and I did the Metallica site probably around before high school, about 94. So I started high school in 96. So 94, 95.
Now, when I was in middle school and high school back in the 80s, the thing to do was to get your denim jacket and paint the album cover on the back, right? So we all had did you do that? Was that still a thing back then? I mean, you're Metallica. Like Metallica would have been one of the bands for that.
That would have been one, yeah. I did not have. I don't think I've ever owned a denim jacket, to be honest. No, but I had enough. I had enough like hockey jackets and stuff like that I would put patches on. So.
Okay. Just when I meet somebody who's like a little older like that and was into the metal, like I have to ask the question, because it was such a Iron Maiden, Metallica, Judas Priest, like everyone had the paintings on the back of those denim jackets. It was cool. So basically, in middle school, this computer, was it your parents' computer? Where did the computer come from? Do you remember? Or
Yeah, it was the family one. I can't really remember like why why I wanted one, but in middle school we had computer labs where you could go in and play Oregon Trail, like on the old Apple IIs and stuff like that. So like I had exposure to those computers back then. I remember going to the library and playing the same things as well. And I think I just kept pestering my parents and like, I want one, I want one, we need one, we need one. And they finally broke down. They bought it, and it was one that spoke too. Like, remember when it was like the first times like computers had speakers and it could like dictate words that you typed on the screen in like this weird archaic computer voice. Yeah, I remember they presented that to me. They walked me into my bedroom, and I had my eyes closed, and my mother hit play, and the computer spoke like, "Welcome, Blaine," and that was it. And then I was hooked basically from that. Yeah.
So that brings up two questions now. Now, what do you have? Do you have siblings that you had to compete? Oh no, it was in your bedroom. So essentially, this computer was yours. And then was your mom or your dad, were they technical? Like somebody had to program it when you walked in. So
Um, both of my parents are pretty well off, and they understood like how to do it. My dad came from more analytical math background. My mother was really good at problem solving, so I think between the both of them, they were able to sort of like put it together. My mother spent years as an administrative assistant, so she was around the technology enough to sort of like be dangerous with it and sort of help out.
do you remember kind of freaking out when you saw the computer in your room? Like that was unexpected, right?
Oh, completely. It, I was just blown away because I couldn't imagine like the process that they had to go to like to get that. I basically knew how much like they were roughly costing at that time. Yeah, and at not everybody had one too, because usually you would have to go to a school or a library to use a computer. So to have something like that, it's like the old cell phones. If you had somebody that had a bag cell phone in the car, they're like, wow, that's not a common piece of appliance. So
So now all I can think of is you're in middle school, you've been given this computer, and now the rules have to set in because you're never leaving your room. So did they start to tell you to kick you outside, go out and play? Or I imagine were you playing hockey at the time there too? You must have been into.
yeah, I was playing hockey. So I had that. That was the forced activity that I had a schedule for. But I know I could not use the computer until my homework was done first. So always home right after school, finish the homework, um, go outside for a little bit, and then usually it was after dinner. When it's dark out, everybody's back at home. Now it's computer time. So while there was still light outside, utilize the light and stay outside.
So did so this computer must have already had a modem, right? So at this point you were already doing dial-up. And do you remember? I want to go back to the website real quick because what's interesting to me is once you had your own computer, did you always have the idea of building that website? I'm kind of interested when you got interested in maybe doing some of this programming because you're playing games, right? Everybody's gaming, but
Yeah,
not
play
everybody switches
games.
to programming. So
No, it was AOL online. It was all of that. Um, yeah, there wasn't even really any like .coms or .nets or .orgs anywhere. It's you just get on AOL, put in the keyword, go to Ford, go to I can't even remember what Lycos I think was one of the search engines at the time. Um, yeah, like, as I sort of was browsing, these resources online, I was always just curious, like where are they? Like how are they put together? Like why does it look that way? Um, and so I started searching to figure out like how they sort of did this stuff, and then I stumbled across that you could sort of view the source of some of these places, and so I started poking at the sources of some of these websites. Like, okay, like I'm seeing these sort of like tag and structure things, and I'm like, well, there must be some common language that they're all using. And so I started researching how HTML is a thing and a language and a spec that all of these different organizations are using to build their presence online, um, and started reading the resources there. And then I think right around that time, you started to see like the books like HTML for Dummies and Yahoo for Dummies, like the Dummies books just became the go-to place to learn anything you wanted to learn for technical information. So
go to the bookstore. I remember around that time, I would go to the bookstore and buy books on programming, whatever that was that I was into at the moment, or something new and interesting.
Yep, like HTML 4.2, 4.1. Like every point release was a new dummies book.
It's kind of sad because I go into the bookstore now, the Barnes and Noble, and I do still force myself to walk over to that bookshelf, which has gotten smaller and smaller. But it's almost like the book selection is almost irrelevant now on that shelf. It's really sad, right?
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. And I do the same thing too. Like I want to walk over to that bookshelf and just experience the act of shopping for a technical book. Just I want to browse. I want to see what's out there just as that process. And I wish I could see some of the recent Go books or the Rust books or some of the other like more technical books, but you're just finding like Office, Internet Explorer, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I have this like, I want to retire. I want to print like 1,000 versions of the new Go notebook and go to store and just put one on the shelf without anybody seeing it, right? Just put them on the shelf and then just to have it there. Like when I wrote the first book, Go in Action, all I wanted to do was see the book on the shelf. And I only found it in one store in Arizona. That's all I ever found. Like it was kind of a bummer. I mean, when I saw it, it was brilliant, but I'd never seen it again. So yeah, there's an experience about shopping for a technical book in like Barnes and Noble that was kind of magical at the time.
I love doing it when that was the only way to do it. You go and you sit in the corner like this, because the computer books is always in like the far corner. Like nobody ever goes there, so it's always in the back. So anytime you go into that section, there was always a chair nearby where you could just sort of sit in the corner next to a window and just be quiet and check out the chapters for 20 minutes and decide if you want the book.
And then you went home and you had this book, and now you were good. You were good for like a week because you were going to just not, you're going to engross yourself into this book, right? Like I remember how excited I was when I found my first C++ book when I wanted to learn that. And I mean, yeah, you're right. That whole experience it's not the same finding it on Amazon and even getting it in 2 days. Like it's not the same. Okay. So let's keep going. So you start to get into high school. High school is those formative years where I tell my kids this. I may have said this on the show before. Like everything, at least for everything up until maybe you're about 30, is based on a 4-year cycle. So, like when you start high school, the next 4 years sets you up for the following 4 years, and those 4 years set you up for the following 4 years. And if you fall behind, you start to fall behind with your peers because they're on that 4-year cadence and you're not. So I try to tell my kids all the time, it's like, you really got to get to the finish line in these 4 years. I don't care how you do it, or you're going to fall behind. So, and high school is kind of where that starts, right? It's those 4 years to graduate high school to be able to make the next decision. So what is it? What's going on when you're in high school? What's your personal priority there? Is it school to get to university? Is it sports? Is it like, what is it that's really consuming you during those 4 years?
It was purely academic, and at that time I actually had a choice between high schools. So in where I grew up, you could go to the local high school for your town, but there was a trade school, a technical school that anybody from the surrounding 5 towns could attend as long as your mailing address was in those 5 towns. And that was like any other trade school. It had plumbing, it had masonry, it had electrical, it had nursing, like that, baking, culinary arts, that kind of stuff. So it was traditionally back then, those schools were looked at to kids that would go to that school, learn their trade, get their apprenticeship or whatever certification they needed, go get a job after high school. And college was usually not a future thing for them. But they did have an IT program there. And so it took some fairly severe convincing, going to open houses at both the local high school and this trade school, for my parents to see that the trade school had the equipment, they had the knowledge, they had everything in place that I wanted to go and take in order to set myself up for college.
So, but that's a high school diploma at the end of that trade school,
Yeah,
right? This
it's
isn't just
it's a
not
normal high
traditional
school.
trade school.
Yep.
Okay.
So the way the high school was laid out academically was for the first freshman year, it always alternated on 2-week cycles. So you went to a week of academics, math, science, English, and then the other weeks you would go to shop. And for your freshman year, for the majority of it, you would visit a different shop every freshman year. So I went through masonry. I went through everything my freshman year just to get a taste of each trade. And at the end of freshman year, you would pick the top 3 trades that you wanted to pick. And then if you were accepted into that shop, you would then finish your remaining 3 years of high school on the same cadence: week of academics, week of shop. And my shop was then IT. So in that program, I learned binary and hex arithmetic. I learned networking and routing. I learned HTML, learned Java, learned some Unix, learned JavaScript, Java server pages, ASP, local area networks, wide area networks. So I touched all of that through my.
All right, I'll interrupt you for a second. I got a whole bunch of questions here because this sounds like an amazing sort of opportunity educationally, right? Did is this still in practice today? Does this school still exist?
Still in
So
practice. Yep.
it's down here in Miami at least they try to have these charter schools where the school focuses on a particular type of subject, but it's not like this, right? Like you're getting your high school diploma education at the same time you're learning a trade. You didn't have to wait till after. Um, but there's no sports then in this school. There's no clubs. There's no kind of activities. Well, there is.
There is. I played varsity hockey. There was hockey, basketball. It was all. I think the high school was a Division 3 school, depending on the sport. Um, so yeah, there was hockey. The only thing that I think wasn't there at the time that I wanted to play was lacrosse. But they had track, they had cross country, swimming, everything, football. Yep.
This is an amazing. I got 2 boys now they finished high school. They're trying to figure out what to do, and I try to share with them all the time that. And I don't know why we have this negativity in our head about trades, but we lack really well-skilled tradespeople today. The electrician, the plumber, everybody's kind of, from my experience, at least in Miami, everybody's hacking it, right? Like, and in Germany, it used to be a thing where you went to, I don't know if it was, I've heard that back in the day, you went into a trade school in Germany, you became a master plumber or master electrician or master roofer or whatever that was, right? Like, I feel like we're lacking that. And this school kind of brings it back.
Yeah, and the icing on the cake, for all seniors, if you had the GPA and the grades up to par, um, instead of going a week of academics and a week of shop, where shop week is still doing your trade but in a educational setting, they would work with surrounding businesses where you just go to work instead. So I had my first job as a senior in high school programming an ASP, doing database work, that kind of stuff. So I got hands-on experience, and all those hours that I went to work counted towards my diploma to graduate.
Oh, so you didn't get paid,
I got paid.
but and you got paid. So you got paid,
That's some, but yeah.
and yeah, I mean you're not getting paid, right? But you got paid, and your hours went towards your completion of your. Dude, I don't know why this isn't modeled everywhere in the country. I'm super confused about this.
Yeah, they were really ahead of their time. They did a really good job with it.
I'm trying to convince my boys to consider a trade. Like you work forever. It's in such demand, but that's cool. That's amazing. Okay, so my guess then is, as you're going through high school, you kind of already know what you want to do, and not only that, you're literally working towards it. So by the time you graduate high school, you're already working at this company. Like, what's next, dude? What do you do after high school? I can't even imagine the options that you have. Are you thinking university? Are you thinking stay in the workforce?
My plan when I chose the high school specifically to go to college. So that was I had an 10-year plan at that point. There was the town next to me was where Microsoft used to have a big headquarters. And so I would pass that building pretty frequently. I'm like, someday I'm going to work there. I'm going to work there. So it's just a big, it was up on a hill next to the highway. It was like a weird setting, but it was sort of like, that was the goal every time I drove by that building. So senior year, I spent all the time researching colleges. So I looked at Rensselaer Polytechnic out here in Troy, New York, Carnegie Mellon, MIT, all the big software engineering, computer science schools I could possibly think of. Throwing my application at them. My parents, I love them to death. They drove me all over the place to go physically stand on campus to see if I would like being there. And at the end of high school, when I finally started getting all the letters back, the school here at RPI, that was my top school. It was only 3 hours from where I grew up. I figured it was a good distance to sort of like stay close, but still far enough away. I actually got a rejection letter from that school after I got a letter saying that I had a scholarship to the school, which completely didn't make sense. And so I think I was at work at the time, and my mother was calling the school to figure out what was going on. And it turns out they had just mailed me the wrong letter, because they had already mailed me a scholarship letter for one thing, and then I already had that. I was down on the roller coaster at that point, like, oh man, I got to go to a different school. That was the one I wanted, and then it was like, oops, no, actually, you're accepted.
RPI, I can't remember what that's.
Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute.
Rensselaer Polytech. Okay, Rensselaer. Yeah, no, that wasn't going to be an easy school to get into. So you must have really had the academic chops to get in there.
Yeah, in high school, they sent out the scholarship. It was called the Rensselaer Medal, and they gave it to top math, science, and engineering students in high school, seniors. And so I got my school to apply for the medal on my behalf for me, because nobody else in the school was going to apply to it, because I was the only one going to that school. So it helped quite a bit.
Amazing. So you get into, after that roller coaster ride, you realize that you're in this school. Do you commute? Do you get to stay on campus? You start the school?
No, I moved to school. I stayed on campus, and I did that, which my college career is another wild roller coaster. I definitely didn't do the traditional college route there. Having been out at RPI for a while, the roommate that I was living with had moved out to back home for personal reasons. So I was sort of like left by myself in the college dorm. So I'm sort of like navigating most of this first school experience, 3 hours away from my parents, and I'm very, very close with my family. So being that far away where I just couldn't see them at any given time or call them for an extended period of time on the phone, it took its toll after a while. School was great, but I think the proximity being far away from home, being in a different area, academically, I think I was ready, but personally, just wasn't. So I decided to transfer out of RPI after about a year to a school closer that's similar to RPI. It's Worcester Polytech Institute in Worcester, Mass, which is only about 45 minutes from where I grew up. And so the transition was pretty easy. It was nice. I could go home on the weekends, spend time with my family and my brother. And I spent 2 years at WPI, and that was right around the time where the whole .com boom was sort of like happening.
2004, yeah, right. You
Yeah,
graduated high school. You did a year, 2001, 2002. So you're starting to get into 2004.
Yeah, and I'm sort of like paying attention to college graduates, what they're making, like what salary expectations are going to be. And when I graduated high school, like they were pretty much what I expected to be able to pay back these private loans that I have in school. And as I was at WPI, it's like, well, I don't know if this engineering thing's going to pan out the way I wanted it to. Like I just don't see it anymore. So I had a long discussion with my parents. Like they gotta change careers slightly. Little less heavy on the engineering. Maybe I should do a little bit more business oriented. Um, so another school nearby was Bentley College at the time. I think it's actually Bentley University at this point. Um, they had a computer science, but more IT related. So a little more higher level, not as heavy in theory as some of the traditional engineering heavy schools. Um, so I ended up transferring again to Bentley College. Spent a couple more years there, accumulating, learning some of the computer science stuff, but some business aspects. And then that's when everything sort of came like crashing down.
So hold on a second before we get there. A couple of questions here. So you're actually losing credits too as you're transferring, right?
Yep.
So what would have been a 4-year degree is now turning into like maybe it took you like 6 years to get it
Yep. Yep.
done. So now it's like about 2006. 2008 is the mortgage crisis, right? I mean, I had a business that completely just crashed in 2008. Like, so you're now moving into this area where the whole economy is about to crash because of these bad mortgages that were being up. But you're going to graduate, let's say around 2006, with both a kind of computer science degree and a business degree. Is that where you're at this point?
That's the plan. That was the plan. And yeah, like as these things were sort of like slowly started crashing, and I'm looking at, all not only am I losing credits, I'm also accumulating debt because they're all three private schools, right? Um, and I'm looking at what these loans are going to end up being at the end of the day, and what entry level salaries are for people with my degree. There's a vast discrepancy there, and I think I just came to the hard realization. It's like if I don't just start working now, I'm going to be paying these loans for the rest of my life. Like I'm just not going to be able to catch up. So I actually ended up dropping out of school completely. I never actually graduated when I was supposed to, even after three schools of transferring. Um, so I went to work full time with the company that I did the high school internship with back in my senior year, as I still had a good rapport with them.
All right, before you do any more there, before we go on from there, I can kind of hear in your voice maybe some regret in not finishing that degree. Do you have some regret that you didn't? I mean, in hindsight is 2020, right? You have to make decisions. Things happen for a reason. You make decisions in that moment. So I've had to learn not to beat myself up over stuff, but I kind of get a sense like you're sad that you didn't finish the degree after all that time.
Yeah, I mean, at that time, yeah, it was definitely a kick because I spent all that time planning, going to that perfect high school, getting accepted into RPI with the scholarship, like all of that just fell in, like, and I got to where I wanted, and to it for it to end the way it did, and making that choice, that was tough. And being one of the very few people in my family too, from my mother and my dad. My dad got his associates. My mother never went to school, so I was the first one that went to a 4-year college, private school, a good one.
I assume that you had conversations with your parents before you made this decision. So
Sure. Yep.
were your parents, I know personally, I would have been leaning on you to finish the degree just because you were so close. I've had to do that with two of my kids already. Were they like, I'm just kind of curious where their head was. As parents, there's no book as a parent, right? Like you get into these moments and you don't know anything more than they didn't know anything more than you did, right? But they have to give you guidance. So these are those tough parent moments. So where were your parents' head? Where were they kind of leaning?
My dad was more of the one that was pushing me to sort of finish, because he knew me better than like my mom did, from like a personal level, like where how I would probably take it. And he was the mathematically engineering inclined of the two. And so I think he wanted me to do it because he wanted to do it as well. I think he saw a little bit of himself in me to like, okay, my son is where I could have been, but he's going to do it this time. He's the one that's going to do it. And so, um, yeah, he was definitely the one sort of like pushing, but not too hard. He was still very supportive because in the end of the day, they were both on my side. After we had these long conversations and realized that, if I graduate and I can't pay for it, the debt's on them too. And we're a middle class family at that point. We're looking at, you know, tens of thousands of dollars in school loans. It would be financially irresponsible in the long run to continue on.
I mean, that's a really mature level of thinking even at that time, right? Because at this point you're 22, 23. I mean, you're still, I mean, you think at every age you are, you think you're like the most mature human being. And then you look at you look at yourself 10 years ago and you're like, God, I knew nothing. But no, I know everything now. And I'm 52. And I know when I'm 62, I'm going to look at myself at 52 and go, Bill, you were so clueless, right?
Yeah,
So,
right.
I mean, you can look back at the time and look at that, but it's still a very mature sort of approach to thinking. Like, I have to be financially responsible here at this moment in time.
Yeah, even growing up, like when I wanted to play hockey was a very expensive sport. As a goalie, all the equipment we have to buy, and I remember my dad was always putting in those extra hours, working for the town, and then going out, being called out 2 o'clock in the morning to plow the snow for people in the next morning. So I always saw that. I was always very close to that, and I knew the sacrifices that he made to pay for all of the stuff that my brother and I wanted to do. So when I think I just got hit with that financial responsibility really early. And when it came time to make that choice, it's like, I can't keep doing that to you. Like, that's not fair. You've already done so much. And at some point, you know, I need to take accountability for myself. And this is the choice that I make for my future.
So it's fantastic that this company had headcount for you at the time too then, right? So you got can I ask you what your starting salary was now coming out of school and you go back to this job? I mean, because let me put it this way. The first job that I took out of university, which was back in 1992 when the economy was in really bad shape, I took it for 18,000 a year because I spent 6 months looking for a job and I needed to start building a resume. I was actually grateful at $18,000 a year just to say I was working, This is like in 92. So I'm just kind of curious at that point. You go back to this company.
Yeah, I think it was around the 20s at that point, somewhere in there, mid 20s, 25, something like that. And I was still living at home, so I didn't have any rent to pay. So it was fine. I could, sort of buy my own food, and I chipped in where I needed to chip in.
But you were grateful for the job, right?
Really was. Yeah, I mean, I learned quite a bit. Like I really got to dig into not only like the web design side, but it was application programming. It was using server side logic connecting to databases. So it was ASP 3.0 with Microsoft Access databases running on a server that was 10 feet in the other office.
What was this business doing? Just real quick, like what was the problem they were solving?
They were selling their web application services to financial mutual fund companies. So all their mutual fund companies had this raw sales data from all of their representatives across the United States, and so they would send this company all of the raw sales data. We would dump it into an Access database, and then we would write online reports to allow them to sort of analyze the data across different facets, whether we group them by location or by sales rep or by, upper and lower bound of sales numbers. Because at that time, doing something like that in Excel was hard.
All right. So how long are you at this company? I'm imagining you're there for a couple more years. We're getting into 2008 or something like.
Yeah, I was there for quite a while. I think due to some sort of small business financial issues, I was actually let go from that. And a few of us were actually let go from that from that job at that point, unfortunately. But I put a significant amount of years in that, sort of understanding sort of roughly how web servers work, how dynamic stuff on the server works, and I know what databases were, and rows and columns and primary keys, and sort of up, all of that. That I didn't really cover at the time in college, so that was like sort of my first exposure to most of this. Um, and then since I was still living at home, now I'm not making any money, even though I don't really have to pay rent. I'm sort of a late 20s freeloader in my parents' house. It's like I'm not contributing at all at this point. So I had to go find another job. And oddly enough, after applying through, I think Monster.com was still, I don't know if it's still popular at this point, but Monster was like the big job website that you could apply through. I happened to randomly reply to a post on Craigslist that a recruiter was looking for somebody for a job at higher education. Like, okay, well, I'll try that one. And that turned out that I got the job at Harvard University, working in their IT department in the Graduate School of Public Health.
Wow, that must have been exciting.
That was a wild interview. Yeah, and I spent 6 or 7 years at that job.
On campus.
On campus. Yep. Taking the train into Boston. Yeah, that was a really good job. That was more of an extension to what I was doing currently, like doing online forums and working with databases, but now I got into more technical stuff in that job.
So I have a couple of questions for you, because you're now kind of living a life back on campus. Was it exciting for you to be on that campus? Did it bring back like bad memories that you didn't get to finish your degree? Was there ever a thought that maybe you could go to school there since you were working there?
Yeah, and fortunately, because I was an employee of Harvard, those employees get ridiculous discounts to take classes. So I took advantage of that and did the full-time job from 8 to 5 and did night classes at the Harvard Extension School to chip more away at the degree I never got. So I didn't start doing that for probably a couple of years until I started there, just to get my feet, on solid ground, working there and focus on that mostly. But yeah, started chipping away a class at a time. Didn't want to overdo it because I was still late 20s, early 30s, still wanted to have somewhat of a life outside of work and school. And because I had a good job, the degree completion at this point was more of a just a personal goal. I'm seeing more and more people getting jobs without degrees because of the boot camps that were sort of emerging at that point, and there was so many online resources you could sort of teach yourself and get a good technical job. So the weight of a college degree in an application was sort of getting less and less. So I didn't put too much pressure on completing the degree at that point, but sort of chipping away at it as I went.
And when do you finish what year do you finish this job at Harvard? I'm trying to get a timetable here. I think you started around, did you start around 2006 maybe, or 2008 maybe? How long were you there for? Like about 4 years?
7 years. So I think it was like around 2012.
Wow. You were there for 7 years. So you're somebody that, do you consider yourself somebody that, like, you don't take change lightly, right? Like, you were at the other job for a long time. Now you're here for 7 years. So there has to be something interesting that causes you to leave this job. So what happened 7 years later?
I moved back to New York.
You moved back to New York?
I moved. So when I started RPI, this was in Albany, Troy area. And so I had an idea of like what this area was way back when I graduated high school. And so at that time, I actually moved out here and lived full time. And I sort of I guess for lack of a better term, I sort of gave Harvard an ultimatum, like, I'm moving. I would love to still work for you. Can I work remote? They're like, well, we haven't tried it yet. I'm like, okay, well, let's see how it goes. So they were fortunate, like they were great and accommodating enough for like to let me move back out here, and I spent the money. I dedicated a room in my condo at that point, just an office, nothing else, no other distractions. And I would drive back to Boston once a month to spend at least 2 days there in person with everybody else, so I would still feel like I'm part of the team. And I did that again for the last 2 years of that 7-year stint.
Was it that you just wanted to get back home and be with family again? Like, if we can talk about it, I'm just kind of interested what made you decide after, I guess, 5 years. You just didn't like living there anymore? My son gets like this. He's, Dad, I don't want to be here anymore. All right, go.
Yeah, it wasn't that because I would like you said before, I don't take change lightly. I was paying attention to the housing market in the area and housing prices around Boston where I grew up. I would never be able to afford a house, like not even close. Even now, like forget it. So, I knew I was out and I picked places that I've been before. Like I looked in Worcester and I looked in Waltham where Bentley College is, and I looked in Albany, Troy, and yeah, I mean, I understood the area and I looked at the housing prices out there. I'm like, that's a little bit more attainable. It's nowhere close to Boston housing prices.
That is super fair because I left New York, Long Island for one of the summer. I wanted the warmer weather in Miami, but I knew I could buy a house and start a family there, and I couldn't out on Long Island. Like it was never going to happen. So I totally appreciate this idea that you get to a point where you're like, I'd like to have a house. Maybe I'd like to have a family. I'd like to have these things, and I can't have it here. So I'm going to move. Okay, that's. I had the same exact thoughts. Same. Okay, so Harvard lets you work remote for a couple more years, right? And then is it you that decides, you know what, I want to be back in an office space, or there's another opportunity kind of. This is now 2012, right?
Yeah, it ended up being another opportunity because once I got out here, I wanted to find other people like me. Like, where are the other software people in Troy and Albany? Like, how can I go and hang out with them? Because I could go to work and go in an office and hang out with them back home, or I could walk down the street in Boston and throw a stone and probably hit somebody in the technical field. But now I'm in Troy, New York. Like, who even works around there that does this stuff? So jump on Twitter and Reddit and all the other like social networks at the time and Facebook to see if I can find other people who touch a computer at this point. Like I don't care. And I found a local meetup back when meetups were a thing. They met monthly at a local bar. They didn't even, bring their computers with them. They just hung out at the bar and chatted and just got to know each other. And once I found that one, I found two more. And from those two, I found five more. I'm like, oh, wow, like there's a sizable community here of engineers and software people and designers. And this is great. Like, I think I found my tribe, my people out here. And because of those meetups is where one of the guys that I had run into, he was working for Agora Games right in Troy. They did a lot of back-end services, matchmaking, and online profile systems for games like Guitar Hero and other big AAA titles. And he had announced that he was leaving that job and wanted to start his own studio to do the same thing. And so I sort of like latched onto him a little bit and chatted with him through a bunch of meetups. And when he posted that he was looking for I think it was a PHP developer at that time, because he had a contract that needed some PHP work, I sort of jumped at it. And that was the start of Mad Glory. It was him, me and two other people that sort of opened the doors at that point. We didn't even have an office. We were sort of working in a coffee shop at that point.
I have a couple questions. Hold on. This is interesting because this change you're about to make from a institution that is God knows how many years old, right, to this startup. I mean, this isn't just a change, right? There's risk kind of in this as well, right? So a couple questions. Like, this must have been was this a difficult thing for you to do, or you were just kind of like, I think, mentally ready? And did you have to take a pay cut? Did you get to keep your salary? Was there other things that you had to do in order to kind of make this jump?
It was more mental preparation than logistical or financial or anything else. I got a raise when I got that job. Yeah, it was the risk of startup, but as the more I spoke with the guy that started the studio, like he had a vast network of clients from his previous job in the gaming industry. So Riot Games, EA, like he knew people all over the place. So, which is why starting the studio was easy for him to do it, because he could almost guarantee the work.
Right. He had revenue coming in on these projects that you were going to help fulfill so they could focus on the gaming side.
Yep. And he was only hiring based on need too. So he already signed the contract. He committed to doing the project with no people. So he got the contracts, and now he was going out to hire. And so that's where I came in with another friend of mine as well. So my friend and I jumped in one of the projects that had no people. So we were the ones to do it.
2012. So how long are you at this place?
I think that's probably another 3 to 5 years, somewhere around there at that point. And we grow that company grows from 4 to 30.
30 people working on a product though, right? Like, he's working on a game product at the end
No,
of the
these
day,
are
right?
it's all professional services.
So it ended up being a professional services company.
Yeah. So Maglory was all professional services, but the clients were traditionally game
Gaming company.
studios. Yeah.
Gotcha. So what was the most exciting project you got to work on in those, say, 5 years?
One of them was a code redemption system for mobile games. So the studio would send us millions of codes for their mobile games, and we would have to sort of load them into this system. They would send an email blast out to all of the players, or all the email addresses they had accounts for, with custom redemption links, and all those emails, when the players would click on them, they would get a free code pulled from the database, and like it would be a dedicated code specifically for that person, and they could redeem that code in game for a skin, an item, sort of randomly generated from a list of stuff they wanted to give away. And so they came to us with nothing. Like, they just, because it was a marketing project, so they had no technical experience. They just said, well, we want to be able to distribute codes. It's like, how do we do it? Like, oh, okay. So we had to put together an attack plan of where to host it, what tech to use, and sort of empower them to sort of use the system as well. So that was one of the fun ones.
You were there so early on. I would have imagined that there must have been talk about you being more than just an employee at some point, right? Was that ever a consideration for you? Like, you were going to be a bigger part of the business, a partner of some form or another?
Yeah, I think I never really pushed it, but I think as sort of time went on, more and more responsibilities came my way, and so I just took them as they came. And I liked it, rather than spending heads down writing code 6 to 8 hours a day. It was now coding like 4 hours a day, other times in meetings, like talking with potential customers, or even helping new employees that got ramped up. I remember one of my best friends at this point. He used to work on Wall Street. He was in the stock trading business, and he went to school for computer science, so he had a computer science background, but he wanted to get back into software engineering. And so he lived locally. He had a good contact with a few of the people that we were working with, and he got hired, and him and I got put on a project together, and he was still like getting his feet wet again, doing software engineering, coming from Wall Street trading. And so most of my time there was just pairing with him and helping him get back to where he wanted to be. And now, now he's actually co-founder of one of his own studios at this point that they opened up, I think, about 6 months ago. So he's having a great time.
It sounds to me like this ended up being a good decision to go in the startup. But what ends up happening, let's say in 2017 or so, that causes you to decide to move on from this?
We at Mad Glory, we sort of thought that there was a good market fit for streaming video, because at that time Netflix was in the streaming business. I think Hulu was around, and those are the only like big players at this point, like doing the big streaming stuff. But like since we were in gaming, we had access to developer kits for Xbox and some of the other ones, and we figured like, well, Xbox people are watching video in this. Like, what if we could build a company or a product and sell to other companies that have video content, but they have no means to distribute, or YouTube is the only way right now. What if we could give them or build a platform so that they could have their own dedicated branded app that you could install on your phone or you could install on your Xbox and watch their video content? And so we spun out, a few of us from Mad Glory left Mad Glory, officially created Odd Networks, and we started to really push that SaaS project.
What were you doing for funding there, or to put milk on the table?
It was all self-funded. It was an original investment from the owner of Mad Glory. He stayed with Mad Glory, but he initially funded Odd Networks to get it off the ground and get it rolling. We had a pre-existing customer with Mad Glory that was more in the video space. This is where it sort of kind of kicked off. And so that customer shifted over as a paying customer for Odd Networks. So it helped that we already had a customer. And we started Odd Networks with, I think, only 4 people. So we wanted to keep it slim. We had an Android engineer, an iOS engineer, and a few like back-end engineers for back-end services or like a front end as well.
So how much runway did you have with that initial funding? Did you have like a 2-year runway, you thought?
I think we only had about a year.
A year runway to get enough, to start getting enough revenue in to pay for it. So how long were you how long, tell me the timetable there, and because this is your first stint in actually being a business owner, right? Like this business you're an ownership, you have ownership in, right?
Yeah, that was more of the scarier part, just having more of an insight into the financials and the stability of a company that not only puts food on my table, but food on the table of other people. And while I wasn't like the primary owner of all the financials, like we had one person that was dedicated to handling that, but we all knew week over week what it looked like. And it was both scary and helpful to just sort of like get insight into that constantly. So the biggest push there is like we knew we had like a stable platform and a product. It was a matter of going to find the people to pay for it.
Selling and marketing is hard.
Yeah, which is not even close to being into my wheelhouse. So luckily we had a contact that was sort of like willing to do this, and so he joined. He was doing Odd Networks, doing most of that, CEO kind of operational sales and marketing kind of role, because he was in the tech space, so he understood all of it, but he needed to actually go out and sell most of the stuff. Trying to get this in front of people. we did well for a while, but then we just sort of realized that after trying to sell something like a product like this, because of the barriers of delivering a product through all the mobile distributors like Google, Amazon, and iOS and Apple, um, that was hard. Like the cycle for that was hard. It took a lot of manpower to do it. If we needed to, if we had a customer with an app on every platform in existence, we need to push an update. You got to do that all over again. So,
And that could take days or weeks, depending on what's going on. The logistics. You have logistics, yeah.
yeah, and so we're sort of looking at like the power, the resource, and the people power needed to do that while scaling the customers to come in. We just knew there was just more bodies and more bodies, and when we started to think about if we go to investors for funding and we put this model in front of them that we need people to get more customers to get more money, that's kind of not a SaaS product. That's not what people want to invest in, right? They want to build the software that's automated as much as possible, that 3, 5, 10x's the income.
Yeah, it's not a pure platform because you have to white label the client and get it delivered. Yeah, I was in a little bit of that at the time with a company too back in 2000 and I guess like 2004 too. The logistics are tough, so I get it. So then what? And you can't just turn this into a regular. Well, why didn't you just consider to become the next Hulu or Netflix and walk away from the white labeling?
Because we also saw that where the money was being spent in that space was video encoding. And if you follow the rabbit, if you open up any app on your TV and you follow the rabbit hole far enough down the chain of that video, you just end up with some recipe that a company is using FFmpeg on some hardware, because I'm taking my raw video, uploading it to the cloud, and then somehow it makes it into all distributable formats: web, iOS, Android.
Oh, so something's just chopping that up automatically, automagically.
Automatically. So you could have a single raw video file that you recorded turn into 20 different variations depending on the platform that you're looking at, in different resolutions and bit rates. And if you look at any of the big like transcoding companies out there, Akamai, Bitmovin, Brightcove, any of those, like that's, once you go far enough, that's what's happening.
So you decide then that you're going to close down Odd Networks at that point?
Yeah, I didn't make that choice. I left before the closure. I think there was like a year after that they decided to close that. I made a shift into another startup that seemed to scale better.
What year is that then? Are we talking 2018?
Yeah, I think that sounds about right. 2018, 19. This startup was out of New York City, and they were in the IoT space. So this was when like IoT was getting a little bit more popular, or more devices were getting more connected. So it seemed appealing that if I was to make a career shift, like I'm still doing software stuff, but the space is different. Let me get out of entertainment, out of gaming. I want to do something else. Got into IoT, and they manufactured and sold pager-sized devices to warehouse and manufacturing companies. So the warehouse workers would wear them on their hip, and throughout the day, if they had bent or twisted or moved in an improper fashion, it would buzz,
What?
alerting them that you probably just picked that box up wrong and you're going to hurt yourself.
They were trying to do this to keep their insurance rates down? Why else would you do this to somebody?
Exactly. Yep. That was the ploy. So the company built the whole software platform on the cloud to analyze the data as it's streamed up from the pages at the end of the day, but there was also software on the devices that use some machine learning models to infer in real time the accelerometer, the gyroscope, and the altitude of the device itself.
Oh my God. And you're Latin long. Like I know where you are at all times. Is this product still out there? Are
Yeah,
companies
still there, still exists.
I feel like I don't know. I guess I'm privileged enough to say I don't know if I'd work there if I had to have a
But it's funny, like actually, surprisingly, one of the very big technical challenges of this product was all of the warehouses that this pager ended up in. They're basically black boxes. Like there's no signal in and out. It's almost impossible to get real-time data off them. So I have no idea where that device is when it's being worn throughout an 8-hour day. At the end of the day, when that worker puts it on the charging dock, that's when it triggers the Wi-Fi to turn on and send everything up.
it was asynchronous. It was data gathering during the day and then but still, I mean, you could build maps of everywhere they walked that day. Interesting. Wow. So you got to work remote, I assume, because you like living in Troy. And then what happens there? How long? You're only there for like a year then?
Yeah, about a year, and then I was really brought on because I was one of the only Go people in the area. Like another guy that was working remotely for the company was a good friend of mine, and so he came to me and proposed the job that I come in and sort of help out because nobody at the company at that point had any significant experience with Go, and they had a lot of it just because they thought it was a good idea to use. Um, and so most of my time is sort of like cleaning up, refactoring, and slimming. And
Yeah, I was going to say you must have seen a lot of code in your brain. Like,
oh yeah, oh yeah. One of the first projects I had to tackle was because there was Go on the actual device, the wearable, doing the the sensor modeling, and they were seeing like and because the device was all battery powered, um, they needed the software to run pretty efficiently. Otherwise, the battery would drain faster. And they had a mark that they needed the device to last at least 10 hours. And they were at the 11-hour mark. And they would wanted to start selling to other customers that had more longer work shifts, but they couldn't because sometimes the device wouldn't make that. So one of my first fortes into profiling head first was figuring out why the Go software on the device was just chewing through battery so fast.
was it garbage collection running too much because the memory footprint on those things was small?
Yeah, it was garbage collection, and the original author of the software had a lot of Go routines, and they sort of treated it as like a message bus in the binary,
Oh,
and they didn't correlate to the fact that the device was a single core. So they just had all this stuff happening all at once. So once I single threaded everything and I ripped all that out, I think I got the device to run in I think it was something like 18 hours, something ridiculous. Like I had to profile it a bunch of times just to make sure that it was right. It just seemed crazy. It saved that much.
yeah, a lot of inefficiency for such a small. So actually, I'm interested. I don't know if you've played with Rust, but my brain would say Rust is probably a better.
Rust would have been. I think it was way too new. Now I think if I had to redo it, I would do Rust at that point.
Some people love that kind of work, and some people just want to do new greenfield kind of work. So it takes the right person to jump in that sort of environment and say, we're going to spend time cleaning up code. I love cleaning up code. Like um, I enjoy it. I enjoy refactoring. So was that work enjoyable to you, or were you more like, I really wish I could start something new?
No, like I do like doing the new stuff, but I think I just have a knack for doing the refactoring, especially when it's not only is the goal is actual performance and numbers, but if another human being has to join the team and be productive, like I love that kind of refactoring too. So part of that was, we're going to hire you. Our stuff is slow and it sucks and we need to fix it. Like it works, but we need it better. We need to mature this product as a technical level, but we need to have other people contribute and not take days and weeks to add features. Like, how do we do that? So that was very much on the top of my mind. And as new people joined the team, I got to mentor um, a new person that had never touched Go in his life. So he got to learn Go at the start. He ended up leaving. He went to Bitly as a senior Go engineer. So he's loving it. He's loving his life now. Um, so yeah, that's a big benefit when I get to refactor code is to make sure other people can understand it too.
All right, so we got about 10 minutes left here, and I want to kind of get a sense of what makes you leave this company. Is where you are now kind of the next job?
No, there was a job in between actually. So I left. I felt like that company was stable at that point, and I contributed what I did. Like the team was solid there. Um, I got another opportunity to work with all the people that I work with at Mad Glory and Odd Networks. They wanted to do another sort of gaming consultancy because Mad Glory at the time ended up getting purchased by PUBG, Player Unknown Battleground. So all of their contracts that they were working with had to go away as they became PUBG. And so there was an opportunity for us to start a similar kind of studio, adapt and change what we learned, what we liked, what we didn't like from that studio, and sort of pick up where we left up there. And we took some of the contracts and sort of ran with them.
What I find interesting, Blaine, is you started your career with these long-term stints, right? And now it's like after a year, you have no even reservation of going on to something new now after a year or two, if it's not really where 100% of where you want it to be. Is that true?
Yeah, and I think it just comes down to the fact that I'm confident enough in my technical skills that I could make a change and be successful somewhere. But I think all the lessons that I learned, I'm confident enough in the decisions that I've made. So I think decisions I make, while they're shorter, if I make them, chances are they're pretty good for me. So I don't have to spend long times making sure that it's going to be a good move.
And you're not burning bridges because you were able to come back to all the Mad Dog people and they were open arms.
Right. Yeah. So we did that. We started that company. We started that one. I think about a year and a half. It went from 5 people to 30 people. I was on 3 different projects at the time, starting out building the framework, hiring junior and mid-level engineers, training them up, getting them to lead them. I move on to a different project. So there was this cycle of me. I'm on a project for 6 months. It's good. You take over. I'm going to go start this one. And that's sort of like most of the senior engineers in the project on the company did this. So we went from 5 to 30, and then it got to a point where I was doing less and less coding, more of like managing stuff, which is I could fake it. I could be okay at it, but it wasn't where my heart was. But at the time, I came across a networking project, which like packet shifting, all of that fun stuff that I'm doing now. And so when the opportunity came up with Subspace to be a senior engineer at that level, but spend a large bulk of my time in the kernel on a socket dealing with this stuff, like high-speed networking traffic, it's like, yeah, I think I'm going to go back and do that more.
So what's fascinating to me, Blaine, is at the end of the day, you always end up being the coach and mentor in the shop, and you're really good at it. And more shops need coaches and mentors to help with, like, I feel like this is the big lack that we have in the industry. Really good coaches and mentors, right? But every time you get into that role, you're like, no, I got to get back. I got to get back into the trench and just be an engineer again, right?
Yeah, well, what's interesting about Subspace is that I was interviewed under that premise. It's like we have a lot of software in Go. We have some good Go people here on the team specifically that you're joining. Like we want you to bring that knowledge that you have and like bring it forward. But I think just the breadth of technology at Subspace, being that it's almost 100 people right now, 40 of which are engineers. I mean, I could never stop learning from a technical side. I'm mostly in the Go side, some of the Linux side, but there's Elixir, there's Python, there's JavaScript, there's eBPF code, there's C, network management, like all of that stuff is just at my fingertips. And we work on cross-functional teams. So I'm sitting next to a guy on my project right now. He's hardcore C. and that's all he wants to do. And he's never seen really even touch Go before. And so we're constantly bouncing back and forth between the two. So it's really good. Like I coach him, he can coach me, but we're both been in the industry for over 15 years. So neither one of us are mid-level junior people, but we could sort of coach ourselves in that fashion and get that feedback.
I feel like this is the first opportunity or first job you've had where you really feel like home. Like you feel like this isn't going to be transient. I'm not here for any other reason, but I really, really want to be here. I think even the job just before this, was still a transition for you, just to like, is that true? I mean, that's the sense I'm getting from you. Like, this is the job you've always wanted.
Yeah, as after I've only, like I said, I've only been here since December, and like I've pushed to production a number of times. I've fixed a bunch of bugs that have been lingering before I started. I've I feel technically valuable. I can learn from the other engineers that are sort of at my level in the industry. And it's not always coding. Um, there's design review docs that we have to create. We have to work with the product and marketing people to figure out where we should be focusing. So it just feels like a very well-oiled machine that I can take in my expertise over the past 20 odd years that I've been doing this.
Which is what I want to bring up, Blaine, because you're now in your 40s, right? I mean, you have to
40
be
as
yourself.
of Thursday last
Okay,
week.
happy birthday, Blaine. When I was starting my 40s, I had just completely failed out of my first business. And I always had this fear of aging out. Like, am I going to age out at some point? Right. So as you get into your 40s here, and maybe I didn't mean to put this into your head now, but do you have these ideas of like, I can't necessarily be an engineer my whole life either. I might age out, or do you feel like this need to, I don't know, like I decided to start a second business because I felt it was the only way I could secure not just a financial future for me and my kids, but to not age out, not to have somebody say, you're too old and now you want too much money. I don't need that. I don't need you. And then what, right? Like I had these fears going into my 40s. So I'm just curious for other people that are listening, right? Do you have this sense of ever aging out and
No, not as it currently stands, because as I sort of look at the landscape of Subspace now, and this kudos to them. It's like they know the space they're in is a hard technical space. So a lot of the people that they do hire are very much in a niche, and they've had years of experience into it, which is why it's as successful as it is, because it is a hard space. So they're not hiring just because you know C. It's because you have years of knowing and understanding the idiosyncrasies of C or of Go, or working on cross-functional teams. And like, you can only get that experience with time. And so they're sort of celebrating that, having most of their engineers as senior and above at this point. If the company grows, maybe more junior mid-levels sort of come in. But for me, I think there's definitely a home for quite a while, and there's definitely no fear of aging out at this point.
So here's my next question, and I'm going to ask you this again because of your age here, right? My dad had a pension. This concept of a pension doesn't exist anymore. So my head always said, I need to have a business. That's my pension. So so as you're getting into now in your 40s, right? Are you thinking about retirement at all? Are you thinking about how am I going to put enough money away so I maybe at 55, 60, I don't have to work? This is the time to do it now, right? The 40s is when you really need to start thinking about it.
Well, funny thing is, I already started this about 5, 6 years ago. I've been dumping money into my retirement accounts for the past 5 to 6 years at this point. So every time I talk with my financial advisor about retirement, I'm like, what does that mean? I don't sit in this room here and I go sit in that room over there. Like, what does that mean for me? I understand from a traditional tradesperson point of view, the plumber doesn't have to go to work anymore. Like, he's done. doesn't have to go be physical labor. So the concept of retirement is just weird to me.
So for me, so the way I see it, Blaine, is retirement doesn't mean I'm not working and being active. It means that if my life flips upside down tomorrow, I have a steady income. I don't see it as, I see it as, do I have enough money in the bank where at 5% a year, I have enough income to put milk on the table and pay the mortgage. That's kind of where I want to be at. And then I decide I don't want to work. I don't have to work, but it's about income for me. Can I generate income without having to wake up this morning and be on my feet, right?
Yeah. And that's close to where I'm thinking. I did just start like blindly putting stuff away in a 401k because my financial advisor told me to. Um, I know enough at this point in my life that I need to trust the people that are experts in their field. And if she told me you need to put X amount of money away a month to retire at 65, okay. So that's what I've been doing. So I have a great resource in her. She is managing the money that I'm putting away, and she's putting it into the right things, understanding my goals. The only way I could answer the question that she posed was, how much do you want to make when you retire? Like, and she asked me this at 35. Like, you want to, in 30 years, you want me to guess what that is? I'm like, I don't know what I'm making now. How about that? We'll adjust as we go. And so we started with that assumption, and that's where it is. Since joining Subspace, that has wildly flipped upside down because, now I'm just in a different financial situation where I have to be a little bit more creative. But once the 65 mark hits, I should be okay.
Yeah, I appreciate you answering that because now, like I have my kids who are in their 20s just starting out. I don't make them, I can't force them, but I've got them at least moving some part of their paycheck into like Edward Jones. And I told them, if you don't stop doing this, in like 20 years, you're going to be a millionaire. I promise you. You're not going to ever have to worry about money again. You're going to hit 40 and not have to worry about money. Where at 40, I had to actually start. Like I lost the first 20 years of my life with other problems, right? So like 40 is the next 20. And so I just want to kind of have that conversation for people that are listening. All right. Last couple things before we have to end here. And this conversation's been great. Do you still seem to have some regret at not getting that college degree? I kind of sensed it, but I feel like you're in this beautiful place right now, and I think things happen for a reason, and maybe you're not here if you get that done, right? You don't know. But I still get a sense that you wish you had the degree, the paper.
Well, we can rewind back to 2020 in March when the COVID hit. That's the year I actually finally graduated because I went back to school. We kind of
those credits were still.
No, I spent actually like 2 years going to SUNY Empire here in New York, all remote, just continuing. I transferred a bunch of stuff in. It was right after one of the first Gopher Cons when I sort of like when I start really getting into the nitty gritties of Go and sort of listening to talks from Pike and everybody else that had those traditional computer science degrees. I'm like, that's the cool stuff. That's cool stuff I missed. Like I should go back and learn and actually finish. So
So it was the content that was important to you.
Yeah, it ended up being the content. Like it had nothing to do with a job or anything like that. It's like I needed to keep learning and I needed to close that. I love that I closed that chapter. I'm debating on even a master's degree at this point at 40 years old. It's going to advance my career. Probably not, but it's the content.
Dude, that's brilliant. I'm kind of really happy you did that. I got a sense that for you personally was an important sort of milestone, and it's kind of brilliant you got that done. That's okay, brilliant. All right, Blaine, we are out of time, bro. This was such an enjoyable conversation. We could keep talking, but that's it. We did it. We did our hour. So if anybody who's listening to this wants to reach out to you to talk to you, share anything with you, what's the best way for them to get to you?
Twitter's probably the best way. send me a DM. It's just Blaine Smith, all one word. Icon's just a black and white guy with a beard. Yeah, that's probably the best. I'll answer anything you got. Always open.
Brilliant. Very, very brilliant. And if you jump on Twitter and follow Blaine, you'll see him throwing my body weight like 4 times over his head, which I really do enjoy those tweets, by the way. Like, I love you're sharing the videos of the hard work you're putting. I know how much hard work that is. And to do it every single day without fail is just mind blowing. So keep sharing that stuff, at least for me. I love seeing that in my timeline. Some of my favorite tweets in my timeline every day.
Yeah, I'm trying to add some personality to the Twitter feed other than just like cool, interesting tech stuff. I'm like, well, we'll bring in some physical activity too. See how it goes.
But I just love, like you saying, this is my goal. I want to get to like 500. I want to be able to lift 500 pounds over my head. And now I'm at 480. So now I'm like every day rooting for you, waiting for the 500 tweet to hit, right? Like,
well, I appreciate it. It's coming soon. I'll get there.
It's amazing. If we had time, I'd love to talk about that, but we are out. So, Blaine, thank you again for hanging out with us. This is the Ardan Labs podcast. Thanks for spending time with Blaine and I, and hope to see everybody again real soon.